What was your perspective on indoor back then as a performer? Because it was really in its infancy. I think in Southern California we had a thing where we did more of like what they do in Texas now, where it was like you arc it up behind the pit in the football stadium, and you play. Maybe you march around a little bit, but the idea of indoor drumline during the spring was like what when I was coming up.
Late 90s or early 2000s, I think is when it really started taking off here in Southern
Right.
California.
But obviously, like Mystique was a huge part, I feel like, of WGI as an organization, like coming up, had a lot of success early on. What was your sort of awareness level, and when did you even decide, like, oh yeah, I'm going to go do that thing?
So I had, I guess, 1996 was in the first year. That same guy, Alan Joannis, was like super relentless about just having an indoor drum line. He had heard about it. He's going to combine a bunch of schools, and this is in Virginia. And we did it, and we went up there, and then that was when there was two classes. There was scholastic class and independent class. That was it. So you were just competing against everybody, and so that was the first time I saw Mystique, and that was 96. So that would have been their first championship. And at that point, I marched a couple local, like ended up being like what would you consider a independent open kind of size. Virginia Helmsman with Tim Bray, who was a recent WGI Hall of Fame inductee. So I had awareness of it. I was super into it. And then when I marched on drum corps with those guys, I had the goal to be able to go over there and march. But at that point, I went to school in Tennessee so I could be closer. But there was only two groups that were like the top. That was Blue Knights and Mystique. And
Right. Yeah. Right.
so it was always us just kind of duking it out back and forth at that point. No, it was something that I was pretty hell bent on just doing that. It's like a 4.5 hour drive for me from college to get down there. But you got a little crew of people coming from your school, and so it's just part of the experience, really, at that point.
Was there any friction with regards to, because I forget exactly when this sort of changed, but the idea of overlap in the seasons between doing winter and preparing for the summer. Like when I marched, we had to move up in January, right? And I know they did away with that at some point, but was that at all anything you had to juggle?
Oh, for sure. And really from the whole time, because, when I marched Crossman in 97, you had to be at every camp. It didn't matter what you had going on. It was like you're expected to be here and expected to be there on time, 6 o'clock Friday evening, and that includes like driving through DC and all these other. And it's a big challenge, but again, the expectation was there. The further you got, the drum corps did not like WGI taking away especially their February and their March camp. Really, is what it ended up doing. So to be completely honest, the reason I stayed at Blue Knights and marched there for the last 3 years was because they were understanding of that, and they were. I would be able to go, and I couldn't afford to fly back and forth a bunch of times. We drove
Wow.
4 hours one way to get to camps.
To Blue Knight, you drove from Virginia Tennessee to Tennessee to Colorado.
Yep.
Wow.
That's pretty brutal. But it's just what you did.
Yeah.
Is what we could afford to do. When we went to Everydays, we took the Greyhound.
Yeah.
Wouldn't wish that upon anybody for that
No,
long.
no.
It's pretty rough.
I had thought about doing that like in the 90s because I'd wanted to march like cadets in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
And I think I looked into Greyhound tickets because they were doing like a special like $39 each way, and
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. Yeah.
No.
But also best thing in the world to do, right? Those super long. I mean, when you're a kid, it's just like, yeah, let's
Yeah.
go,
Yeah, you're sitting there, you're tapping out your music with your fingers and
Yeah.
just trying to be ready. I had at the time, I'm sure it was a CD player. And I'm just rocking it.
So at what point did you realize you wanted to teach?
I think I had that in mind all the time. I think
Hmm.
I ended up teaching a couple band camps when I was in high school. Having March Drum Corps, I had a buddy that was just getting started. He could use help, so I just went to there and helped him out. Again, I think I put myself in. I just wouldn't say no. I may not know exactly how to do it, but if you ask me to help out, I'm gonna try. And then I think just putting myself in those learning opportunities, I think was pretty beneficial. And looking back on it, I tried to pay attention to what they were saying to the horn line, and maybe I was nosy or whatever it was. I just trying to soak up as much as I could as I was doing it. But I feel like I had a lot to give back. I was real passionate about teaching bass drums for a couple of years right after I aged out, and then the scope of things just kind of gets broader and broader as you go.
So when you march Blue Nights, was it on snare? Are you a snare drummer, like by playing?
Bass drummer.
You're a bass
Yeah.
drummer.
Yeah.
All right, that's what I like to hear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There you go. You didn't even realize.
Bass drummers rule the world, man. Yeah. So,
Well, yeah, I did snare in college, and it was so I was able to kind of get that experience and have that more rounded. A lot of times bass drummers, especially at that point, it's a little different now, but they're able to do just enough, or like they're good at some things, but they couldn't play all the choppier things. And so that was something that I really put effort towards.
oh yeah, for sure. So let me ask this: Are you a 2, or are you like a 3, or what were you?
I was always the middle 3. So I was 2 and 4 where I played mostly. I finished out on 2.
Yeah. All
I
right.
played 2 at Mystique.
Cheers to all the bass 2 drummers out there, because
Cheers.
that's my forte. Yeah.
If you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. If you're not thinking on the upbeats, then you're not like.
Or even just, I mean, like coming up as a bass drummer definitely gives you a different perspective than coming up as a snare drummer. Like that's just obvious. Like there's I don't want to say like a different value system, but certainly what it takes to execute everything, at the level you're expected to requires a little bit of a different thing.
Yeah.
Than being, and maybe like, upper battery people would benefit a little bit of having a little bit of that, that perspective of, understanding it's not just you, right? It's everybody else is essential.
Yeah.
To what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. But so you marched drum corps 5 years. How many years did you march as a member of Mystique?
I marched 4 years.
4 years.
2000 to 2003.
Oh, okay.
And they had some success during that time.
Yeah, we ended up. I think we won the medal 2 of those years.
Mm-hmm.
The first 10 years or so with Mystique were really kind of on a tear. There was less groups, so that was helpful. But we had 5 championships in 10 years, something like that.
What was the group, if you could describe it? Because I taught indoor in '99, and we went to Dayton. I taught a group called the Black Knights, and that was my first time going to Dayton and just being exposed to all of that. And what were those early days of Mystique like? Even just speaking to the time that you were there. I remember it actually like being a very sort of like I don't know if you want to call it theatrical, but like creating like a very immersive thing, right? Where they were going to embody not necessarily concepts, but like maybe like characters or things like that. even back then. You know,
I think theatrical was probably the correct way to, especially at that point. Um, those early shows, I think we were one of the first to come out there with painted floors and just again more so. Some of it was looking at the color guard sheets and kind of doing what they were doing because it was in its infancy at that point. Um, but they were able to kind of make it larger than life. I think better than some groups, especially earlier on, and really kind of going with the strong whatever they had that was strong. For the first 4 or 5 years, the pit was not strong. It was definitely more of a battery driven kind of thing and the more the theatrics. And then right around 2002, 2003 is where it started shifting when Eric Johnson came on board as their ranger.
Yeah, who were the people that were really driving it, running things like the sort of key staff people, the designers at that time?
So the beginning, it was Don Click, and who works at Colts with us as the program coordinator. And then there's another guy named Chris Finnan, who's still on our board of directors. They just similar kind of situation where they had the couple high school groups and they combined them. But it was really a homegrown team. There's a lot of Don's brothers and family, and that got, they were able to really just kind of motivate. They didn't have necessarily the best players all the time, but it was more so that championship expectation and that level of quality that they was being expected from them, even though it was still pretty young. I think it set a good tone for the rest of it. And then Shane Gwaltney came on. He was an original member and then came on staff and then became a designer in 01. And he's been a designer since.
Well, I didn't realize he goes back that far with you guys.
Yeah, he's the only person to be part of every single show on some level.
Wow.
Did he have a big beard back then too, or
I don't think it was as impressive. It's gone through cycles.
I've never met him personally, but I've just seen pictures. But for some reason the beard always sticks out.
Yeah, he took that one picture that is sort of used everywhere.
Yeah.
There was a point where I think he was dabbling in some beard contests, literally. So Shane coming on board and having him has put a lot of stability, just having the same person. He writes half the show, right? He does the visual and the battery arranging. It was him and Eric Johnson until 2013, and then Matt Jordan took over the front ensemble stuff. That's it's always been people who have come through the organization typically that want to give back. So as you know, nobody's making any money off this thing.
Right.
If they are, they're hustling on a lot of different levels. But to have a group at this level, you have to have a lot of really dedicated people, and people that are really selfless and then can put a lot of time in. There's a lot of sacrifice, especially for all the tech staff and everybody who's there Friday night through Sunday afternoon.
Isn't it amazing? Like, I went back and I looked through like some of the older Mystique shows, and just the transformation and how like you guys seem like you pushed the envelope every single year you come out, and it the first one I went back and I watched was, I want to say it was 02. It's like the Gladiator show.
Mm-hmm.
Was that 02? And it's just cool to see the transformation. What Mystique was from there, and then I look at a show like 2017, and just to see the complete, and just pushing the envelope with all those shows. 04 is another one. The sins that I forget what it.
Sins, and that was I guess the only time I made it out there to y'all's neck of the woods.
I was there. That was like the first time I'd gone to see WGI live, and I've said this story before. It's like I go and I'm like pumped because I'm like a drum corps guy. Yeah, I'm gonna go watch some drumming. Then I go and I'm watching inside, and I'm like, what the heck am I watching? Because I didn't, I wasn't too familiar with the activity, but it all ended up being cool. Yeah,
And we grew up. I mean, like it's funny because we grew up when we marched. We were probably thinking that indoor was going to go like the way like PASIC went, right? Like
Yeah.
those North Texas lines and all those, you know, just like clean, just so. But like they came out in their jackets and the bow ties
Bow
and stuff
ties,
like
yeah.
that. And you mentioned the words pushing the envelope. Design wise, what was Mystique trying to do back then? I know it's kind of like an odd question, but did it even feel like pushing the envelope, or was it just like, yeah, we're going to do this thing? Like, what was the?
No, I think there was a couple concerted efforts to make sure that they were, whether it be if you the funniest thing to me as always, and we used to go back and watch every year with the kids, um, and just like talk about it. It just at a certain point it gets there's too many shows and you have to pick some. If you watch the first 2 years back to back, the '95 season, where their first year, and then the '96 season, it's like something exploded going into the second year, and it was just so much more visual. The drill was a 10 times more fast paced, and it, for what that was at that time. Um, but yeah, there's always when you've been around this long and you've had success like this, we don't take it for granted by any means. Very difficult to keep, topping yourself and not do something that you've done in the past, and just try to kind of reimagine it. And I think every year's you don't know what's going to be that big thing. Like in 2017, when the marimbas moved that very first time, we had seen it a million times, so we didn't really get that worked up about it. Just watching it as staff, but like every time people would gasp, and so it's like it's hard to know what people are gonna really kind of connect to every year. But I think we do a good job of zigging and zagging and not being the same, but having that same sound, that same quality of sound, that same um, uh, just identity.
Well, and that's something that in thinking about this conversation that we were going to have today. Um, you know, my my first exposure to Mystique was 2012, 2013, like actually seeing you guys live. And going from there forward, seeing you guys live every year, the one thing that really sticks out to me with regards to like, again, this is from the outside, obviously, is that sense of identity and maybe even like the level of commitment to fully becoming immersed in the performance so that the audience can become immersed in the world that you're trying to create for them. Was that something? I know you talked a lot about like Mystique being sort of homegrown, right? And the people that work there were the people that marched there, and you guys were just trying to, there was obviously like a lot of care that went into that. Like Mystique being this sort of place that essentially like you guys all really cared about, and having that full level of commitment into like, we're going to do this. Was that in place back then, or was that something that sort of evolved over the years?
I would say it's been that kind of that same core of by any means necessary, to where we're not afraid to bite off something bit more than we can chew, and kind of figure it out as needed. And then really just the managing your risks and this knowing what you can handle. But as far as the commitment from the kids, it's something we've talked about forever. You have to be believable, right? If you don't believe it, then your audience is going to have trouble going wherever you're going with you, as far as your journey. But the kids and the members and the staff do a good job of finding that that personal or that emotional connection to where a lot of times, depending on what show it is, like like in 2017 when they had short hair, they have to live that every day.
Yeah.
Their kids they were waiters at Olive Garden, some of them, and it's like we got less tips because we
Yeah.
we just looked more pale and deathly. But just having that where they can not necessarily live it all the time, but they can own those moments, and they have the understanding of whether it be a character or just their role within the show. So I appreciate you noticing that.
I mean, and it was, what I will say is that was something that when I think back to when I was first exposed to drum corps and my sort of wide-eyed perception of all of that back then, like one of the first things I saw was a recording of, Santa Clara 86, right? And not them playing, but them acting out the part of being, like the Russian Christmas thing back then. And I was going, whoa, like what is this? And then actually going out on tour and realizing that all of these places had such strong traditions. Like when you went to when you went to Vanguard, when you went to Cadets, when you went to Blue Devils, you were a Blue Devil. You were a cadet. You fully committed to it. You embodied it. You really looked forward to being able to wear that skin, essentially. And I feel like if any group has that now, right, that same spirit, it's Mystique. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's something that we strive for. And I was jealous of you guys being able to drum outside all the time, but something that's nice for us is we can pull from a lot of states. Like we had 5 or 6 kids last year from Florida that were there every weekend. That lived in Florida. And we can draw from a bigger area because, if you're willing to put the drive in, 6, 7, 8 hours, you can be several states away and still be able to get here. But yeah, it's a process.
Well, can I ask you this? Is there any secret? I don't know if I would call it a secret, but because now there are so many groups. There's so many people trying to do this, right? Generations of as soon as you age out, you want to go and you either want to teach or you want to start a group or whatever, right? So everybody's trying to learn. And I feel like what you guys were able to bring to the Colts, what you guys do year in and year out at Mystique, with regards to getting the kids to buy in on that level. How do you do that?
Yeah, is that something like the kids like? Because let's go back to
there's a lot of staff people that would like to know.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Having vets that have been through the system and been through everyone's doing the same thing. As far as different groups, they're teaching at least similar skill sets and they have a similar schedule and all that kind of stuff. Having vets that have already worked with you and the flow of what that is, I think that's big. We at Mystique, we've had very little turnover as far as kids don't necessarily go other places most of the time. It happens from time to time, but it's we have a lot of people come back, so that's a testament to hopefully providing them a great experience. And then it's nice to be good at what you do, and so they have trust in us. I would say that having done it before, it's always easier for those students to buy into whatever it is you're doing. And then if everybody on their chain, as far as the teachers all the way down to the students, understands their role, it makes it a little easier. But I think for me, I've seen a lot of groups go from start to finish because I'm there at Mystique. I'm there the whole time. And with Colts, I was there a bunch. So you know the process, and I guess kind of when to hit the gas and when to hit the brakes, some of it, and just experience. but it's not something that's smooth all the time. I think having a great student leadership is really key. If they can be an extension of the staff, and they can be a voice up here that's going to have the same kind of information as, you know, typically it's going to be stronger for me.
We talk about staff a little bit. Back in those early years that you were a member, and then the transition to staff at Mystique, was the staff size like what it is now, as you see like larger staffs, or was it just like a handful of people? And
I would say, yeah, a handful of people, and it really kind of depends on where we end up rehearsing. That's, as any independent group is probably saying, like, it's hard to find a place that's going to let you just be there all the time.
Yeah.
Without some kind of connection, and then to be able to afford whatever they're asking you to pay, if they're asking you to pay something. That, for me, I think is what destroys most people's ability to do a group and have a consistency. We've been bailed out by a handful of people several times, and people within the organization that are a band director. Currently, it's my wife, who's a middle school band director, and we're able to use her facility at her school. But we're asking for a lot of time, a lot. Mm-hmm. And to be good, you have to be there all the time doing it and producing it and putting it on. And you can't have a couple weekends in a row where like, we don't have a gym again. We don't have a gym again. It just doesn't work anymore. In the early days, you just dealt with whatever it is. As a member, we rehearsed at the Pearl warehouse one time for a whole weekend.
Nice.
Just in the parking lot, I think a lot of people have similar stories to where like, you're just making it work. You're just trying to tread water, but to be great, you got to be able to minimize those moments. And, for higher end drum corps, I think they got all that stuff figured out, right? They travel great. They have awesome facilities when they get there. There's a reason that they're great, because they have those times to fix that kind of stuff and stuff.
So many staff people though are listening to everything you're describing right now and just going like, "Yep."
Yeah.
Like they're feeling all of that pain that as an audience person you don't necessarily are even aware of is going on.
And like for me, watching groups from the outside, I really think logistics is like the X factor. Being sound logistically is like the X factor for the success of a group. If you're on top of everything, if you could stay on top of everything as far as costumes, design, everything, where it's not just, well, I think they're coming this week. I think that makes a big difference.
I mean, it even not just with regards to what you can get done, right? Like not losing any time.
Yeah.
But any of us that have done this realizes that the kids just even being aware that those kind of shenanigans or like that kind of stuff is going on, that has an impact just in terms of like how vulnerable they feel, how stable they feel the situation is. Can they fully commit to something and then like the rug gets pulled out from underneath them like the next week or something like that,
Yeah. And really, like I said earlier about gaining trust with the kids, like this is all part of it. Like if you show every time I'm here, I'm unlocking these doors for you every rehearsal on time. I'm here to take care of issues. Like you said, logistics. We've had the same truck driver who was a former parent for 20 years.
Yeah.
And we could not operate without that man. And we ended up buying our own tractor this year so we could pull it whenever we wanted to. So there's a big truck shortage. And so being able to, having been around for this many years, 28, 29 almost, we have some things in place to where we've at least learned the lesson already, so we don't have to learn it again. And I do as much as possible. Anybody who reaches out to me as far as a director or somebody who's trying to run their own group, I'll spitball with them as long as they need to, just to try to help them out. Because it is difficult, and at any point we could be belly up.
Sure.
Yeah, isn't it amazing though that you get like you talk about that truck driver, but just like I'm sure there's been plenty of parents that their kids have aged out, but they still stay somewhat connected
Mm-hmm.
and help out when they can. And shout out to all those volunteers, you know,
Yeah.
that help things get done. You know?
Like it's funny, and not a lot of people know this, but like in Southern California, I would say in the years leading up to the pandemic, probably like like this last like the previous decade, there was literally one family, one father who happened to like I think be co-owner of a trucking company, and he was responsible. He ultimately like became responsible for like literally pulling everybody's trucks, like either him personally or his people, because he had a couple of kids that had come up through the activity, right? Became exposed to it, and then just wanted to be that person. And I don't know what a lot of these like all the independent groups, what they would have done without that guy
Yeah.
during that time.